Welcome to part one of the English Placement Test Prep Review for Central Carolina Community College. This is part one of two presentations. Part one will cover reading comprehension, while part two will cover sentence structure. It's important to note that this portion of the placement test is comprised of 20 multiple choice questions, each of which only has one possible answer. And the test is not timed. So be sure that you're taking as much time as you need and getting through all of these. I'd also like to note that as we move through this presentation, there are going to be several examples. I will not be reading the examples and reading all the possible answers. I will instead lead immediately into a conversation about the correct answer. So if you'd like to test yourself as we go through this, please be sure to pause the movie when you get to example slides, attempt to answer it yourself, and then move forward with revealing the answer and explanations. So the first thing that you're going to be tested on in terms of the placement test for reading comprehension is finding the main idea. Sometimes the main idea will be one sentence in a paragraph. Other times the main idea is kind of implied through details or examples. Basically, you have to take little pieces and put them all together to figure out what the bigger picture is. But some questions to be asking yourself while you're reading through this presentation is, what are these passages about? Or rather, what is the point that's being made about the topic? It's also a good way to think of it in terms of if you were to read this paragraph and walk away and remember nothing, what would be the one thing that you would have to remember? That's the main idea. So this is the first example that you see, and many of these are examples from previous placement tests, so they're going to look very similar to the types of questions that you're going to be seeing on the exam itself. Remember, I'm not going to read the paragraph or the answers, I'm just going to reveal the correct answer. So if you'd like to read through this and attempt it yourself, please pause the video now and then resume whenever you're ready. The correct answer to this first question is B, that elasticity of the water surface is one component of the lizard's ability to run on the water. The most important thing to remember about these questions is we can only make answers based on the information that's given to us. So with that in mind, answer A is incorrect because it mentions America, and there's no mention of America in this paragraph. And because that's adding additional information, we know that that answer is immediately out. Answer C, kind of along the same lines. All lizards are able to run on water, it says, but this paragraph doesn't talk about all lizards. It refers to a single lizard-like creature, and we can't make that assumption. Finally, answer D is out because it talks about the hot climate in the Amazon, and there's no mention of the climate at all. So again, that's adding additional information. This is the second example for finding the main idea, and the correct answer here is D. Bob wants to make money, but he also wants to feel satisfied in his work and help his fellow man. This is a good example of having to pick out little pieces to put together the main idea. It's not stated directly, right? But you can use deductive reasoning here. If the right answer doesn't jump out at you right away, try to figure out which answers you know can't be correct. That way, if you got down to having to guess, it'd be a 50-50 chance instead of a 25% chance. So answer A is incorrect because we can't logically conclude that he's having a midlife crisis. It's obvious that a lot of things are changing for him, but it's not even stated or even implied that he's struggling. He just seems to be faced with difficult decisions. Answer B is incorrect because again, this is not the main point that we're taking here. Making a list of his interests and abilities worked for Bob, but we can't say definitively that that works for everyone. So that's not the main point that we're getting here. This is just one of the things that he did to help himself. And finally, answer C is incorrect because there are many career options open to everyone today. Well, I'm sure that's a true statement, but again, we're thinking about what is the main point that's being made in this paragraph. And this main point doesn't even mention Bob, and Bob seems to be the subject of the paragraph. So again, using deductive reasoning, and if you have to make an educated guess, you can do so. A final example just to kind of drive the point home. The correct answer here is D. Apollo 13 was a blockbuster movie for the summer of 1995. This is a really good example of finding a main idea that is stated in one sentence. You'll notice the correct answer is the first sentence of this paragraph. And it's important to note that answers A, B, and C are all incorrect because while that information is included in the paragraph, they're all details that support the main point. It's exciting. That's one thing that made it a blockbuster. Audiences were on the edge of their seats. That's another contributing factor to it being a blockbuster. And it was based on a true story. That's also a contribution to it being a blockbuster. So the main idea that we're getting here is that this movie was a really big hit. Everything else that follows is just an explanation of why it was a big hit. So that's the first portion, determining what the main idea of a paragraph is. The second thing that you'll be tested on is your ability to determine sentence relationships. And understanding relationships between sentences is one of the key parts to understanding a passage. Very often, authors will use transitional words or little keywords or phrases to kind of hint at the reader that there's a particular type of relationship going on here. You want to be asking yourself the same questions. What would this passage be about? What is the point the author's trying to make? But more importantly, you want to look for these words that indicate relationships. These are the most common types of relationships that you're going to see in sentences. The bold words represent the type of relationship, and the words that follow are cue words or transition words that indicate that relationship. So for example, if we look at contrast, which is showing the differences between things, if you see the word but, you know that there's a contrast going on. Cause and effect, because, for this reason, or as a result. That's a clue to you that what came before was a cause and what is coming after is an effect. It's very important in these questions that you pay extremely close attention to the type of question that you're being asked. The answer can change depending on what the question is looking for. So here's the first example of finding sentence relationships. You will be presented with two particular sentences, and then you will be asked a question about their relationship. Again, take your time, try to mark out the ones that you know can't possibly be right, and if it helps you, throw in some of those transition words in between the sentences. If you throw one of those keywords in there and it doesn't seem to make much sense, chances are that's not the type of relationship that you have. So the correct answer for this first example is B. The second sentence is a comparison with the idea that's stated in the first, okay? What we're getting at here is that both of these sentences are pretty much talking about how the older generation is kind of afraid of the younger generation. They use an example from colonial time when there was no TV and kind of compare it today. And then they also use an example from modern times where you just talk about the older generation in terms of listening to rap music. Answer B is incorrect because it looks like it might be the right idea, but when we look at that word example, that means it's something that's very similar to it. And I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that they mention colonial America in the first sentence and rap songs in the second sentence. Do we think that there were actually rap songs in colonial America? Probably not. So answer A is out. Answer C is incorrect as well for obvious reasons. If the first sentence was a cause and the second sentence was an effect, you could throw the words like, as a result, many older people today are horrified when they hear the words to some rap songs. It doesn't really make much sense, so it's out. And finally, the second sentence is neither a solution nor a problem, and so that answer is out too. The second example, the correct answer is C. The second sentence is an effect, and that means that the first sentence is a cause. So let's try it out. Aerobic exercises done vigorously for 15 or more minutes at a time increase the heart rate. Here's the cue words. As a result, a carefully followed aerobic exercise program can strengthen your heart. The answer A is incorrect because the second sentence is explaining what could arise from following the program, but the first sentence is talking specifically about aerobic exercises, and the second sentence refers to an entire program. So they can't be explaining each other when they're not talking about the very same thing. Similarly, answer B is out because they're not contradicting each other. They're both very much talking about the same subject matter. They're just talking about it in different ways. And finally, answer D is not a cause because if you flip-flop it and read that sentence first, then say, as a result, aerobic exercises done for 15 more minutes at a time increase the heart rate. It's kind of backwards, and we're looking for the thing that makes the most sense. Again, using common sense and logic here is very important. Don't let the fact that you're taking a test scare you. And the final example for determining relationships between sentences. The correct answer here is C, that the second sentence is stating a cause of the effect found in the first sentence. And again, if you notice the question, they're specifically asking you, how is the second sentence related to the first? If they asked you the reverse of that, how the first sentence is related to the second, you might have a different answer. But going back to the explanation, so the effect is in the first sentence, which means that the cause is the second sentence. So let's read that second sentence first. And essentially what they're doing here is they're explaining to you what a word processing program is, right? And now that we have that understanding of what the program is, they're kind of saying, you know, because we understand this, we make fun of people who still use typewriters. Why would you use it when it's clearly so much easier to use a word processing program like Microsoft Word? So we want to throw those words in. Those keywords really make all the difference. Answer A is out because they're not talking about different things. They're talking about the same material, so it's not a contrast. Answer B is out because they're talking about the same subjects, but they're not talking about the exact same thing. So they're not exactly alike. One is explaining how a program is used. The other is explaining what happens when someone uses typewriters over a program. So a little bit different material. And finally, answer D is out because the second sentence is providing more information, but not of the idea. The idea of that first sentence is that people who use outdated technologies often get made fun of. That second sentence does not have that same idea at all. The second sentence is just a definition. So that's the second thing, finding the main idea and determining relationships between sentences. The third of 4 items that you're going to be tested on for this reading comprehension portion is your ability to find inferences and draw conclusions. This can be a little bit more tricky because now we're not looking for something that's stated directly in the paragraph or picking up little pieces and piecing them together. Now we're kind of reading between the lines, right? Making an inference or drawing a conclusion has to be logical. And it has to be sensical. So when you're making these things, and essentially an inference is just a logical conclusion that we could come to. Okay, you have to look for clue words that are provided by the author. They'll be in the paragraph, but it won't be stated directly. You kind of have to interpret those words. Use your own knowledge and personal experience if it applies to particular clues that you're given. But most importantly, common sense and logic. Okay. Ask yourself, is this logical before you decide to make an answer? So the first example here, they've given you, again, a small paragraph that you have to read, and they're saying, we may infer from this passage that A, B, C, or D. The correct answer here is A. When we trace our family history, we may find bad and good things. And the reason that this answer is correct is if we look at the last sentence of the paragraph, even if you find a skeleton in the closet, maybe you could just ignore that twig of your family tree. It's kind of implied by saying skeleton in the closet that might be something bad. Maybe you could just shy away from that. He doesn't come right out and say it, but it's kind of implied. We have to kind of read between the lines, you know, between that word, those words, skeleton in the closet. What does he really mean by that? Okay. And then there are good things that you can find too. Answer B is out because we can't definitively say that tracing a family tree is not worth the effort. Sure, it might not be worth it for some people, but can you definitively say that it's not worth it for everyone? No, we can't. And so that can't be a logical conclusion that we make. or a logical inference. Answer C is out for the very same reason. Excuse me, not the very same reason. Answer C is out is because this information was stated directly in the paragraph. We know from reading this paragraph very directly that the records for finding information about our ancestry has changed. They start off by telling us what we had to do in the past and how we can do it nowadays. So we can't make an inference about something that is directly stated. So answer C is out. And finally, answer D is wrong for the exact same reason that answer B is wrong. We can't say definitively that it's not worth the effort for everyone, and we can't say definitively that it is worthwhile for everyone. So again, these answers have to be logical and they have to apply to things as a whole. Example number 2 of inferences and conclusions. The correct answer here, the man described in this passage, most probably D, finds himself with new freedom after serving in the armed forces and wants to make the most of the opportunity. We get little tidbits. Friendships that he had formed during the war had faded. So the man was in the war, right? They don't come right out and say that he was serving in the armed forces, but we kind of get the idea that he was. He's not sure what he wants to do, but he knows that he wants to be independent and have fun, right? Answer A is out because we don't know what he's going to do about his job. We can't definitively say that it wants to happen. He discusses going back to his old job or finding a new one. Doesn't make a definitive answer or selection. Answer B is out because they're adding in additional information. There's no mention of his family in this paragraph, and they mention his family in answer B, so we know it's out. And answer C is stated directly. He misses his wartime buddies. And that goes back to that same sentence. The interpersonal relationships he had formed during the war had faded as his friends had dispersed. So that's kind of stated directly. So we can't make an inference about something that's stated directly. This final example is very, very simple, almost to the point of being silly, but it drives the point home about making an inference. The correct answer here, what probably happened, is C, that Turner heard a weather forecast that predicted the rain. It seems like the most logical conclusion that we could make, right? We're given details, but it's not stated directly what's happening. We don't know what Turner heard on the radio, but we know that if he's grabbing his umbrella and taking it with him to the bus stop on a sunny day, he probably heard that it's going to rain. Right? And that's what we're talking about when we're making inferences. You take all the information that you have and make the most educated decision that you can. So 3 things so far: finding the main idea, determining sentence relationships, and drawing inferences and making conclusions. The final thing that you'll be tested on for reading comprehension is your ability to determine an author's tone. Now, the author's tone or their voice, it's their attitude toward the subject of the passage. Very often it is directly related to the purpose of them writing. So if someone's trying to convince you to make a change, they might be defensive or they might be argumentative. You want to kind of start to put these things together as you're reading. One of the best ways that you can do this is to imagine as you're reading these passages that the writer, the person who wrote it, is standing directly in front of you and they're speaking to you out loud. What would their voice sound like? What would their body language suggest? And their attitude toward it kind of indicates their mood. So you'll see descriptors like maybe the author was really cheerful or really angry or really ironic or really intense or really depressed. But you have to imagine how would they sound, and it very often again goes back to what they're writing about. The first example here is very reminiscent of the exam. There's 2 particular questions associated with this paragraph. So we answer the first one first, and then we answer the second, one at a time. Okay. The correct answer here for this first one is that the author's tone is defensive. He's complaining. It's almost like stop giving me so much grief for wanting to be a smoker. He's not suggesting that there's something that we should be doing about this or anything else. He's just kind of complaining, right? And so go through the other opinions and work out why they don't work. Is he being persuasive? Is he trying to convince us to do something? No, not really. He's just whining. Is he being neutral? Absolutely not. This person clearly has an opinion about the situation with smokers. And finally, is he being critical? Probably not. He doesn't seem to be upset with the way that it's being handled. He just seems to kind of be defending a freedom that these people have. Now, based on this, based on him being defensive, this author would agree that A, smoking should be a personal choice. He already indicated above that smokers are segregated from non-smokers, so that would be a vindictive thing for him to do, to indicate that non-smokers should be segregated. I don't think he's looking for the opposite. I think he just wants everybody to be able to do what they want to do. Answer C is obviously out because he indicated that both of his parents lived through smoking all of their adult lives and never had any problems. And finally, I don't think that he's a sadist and thinking that young children should be allowed to smoke if they want to, but rather this is a personal choice that we make when we arrive at the age at which we can make it. Okay? Example number 2. The correct answer in terms of the author's tone here is that he is being persuasive, D. And the way that we can tell that this is a persuasive paragraph is in the last sentence. The first few words, let's find another way, right? He's indicated that whatever's going on now isn't working very much and that we should try to probably do something else. And that's very much a persuasive attitude, trying to convince us that there's something that needs to be done or something that needs to be changed. I'd also like to indicate that if you don't know what all of these words mean, that's okay. Plug in the ones that you do know and see which one makes the most sense. So is this author being admiring? Absolutely not. He doesn't have any good things to say. He's just kind of laying out the facts, right? Secondly, he's not begrudging. Begrudging means to hold a grudge against someone. And he doesn't seem to be holding a grudge against all of these gun control laws or the way people that want to use their guns. He's just saying that, you know, people are going to get access to them if they want to. He's clearly not neutral because he has an opinion and he's trying to convince us that we should find some other way. So he's obviously persuasive. And with this having a persuasive tone, this author would agree that C, we should revoke some gun control laws. Don't think he's saying that America needs more gun owners. That's not what the problem is. He's specifically talking about gun control laws in this paragraph. Secondly, I don't think that this author is so deluded to believe that guns don't cause violence, but rather we become violent in the way that we have to obtain them because of these strict gun control laws. And finally, if he just said at the beginning of the paragraph that stricter gun control laws won't help, I don't think that he would agree at all that we need to have more. We instead need to lighten the load and find some other way to make everyone more accountable. And the final example for tone, the correct answer is B, contemptuous. And you can almost hear it in this author's voice. He's not admiring these young kids. He's complaining about them. He's got an attitude about it. He's obviously not neutral because he's got something to say, and he's not being persuasive. He's just ratting them out, right? Just complaining about them. And as a result of that, he would agree that parents should be asking more of their kids. The notion about indoor plumbing, answer A, that is completely irrelevant to the subject that he's talking about. That was just a device that he was using to drive that point home about his contempt for the younger generation. B is incorrect because he's clearly saying that parents aren't asking enough of their students, right? Teenagers don't want to lift a finger around the house, but they expect their parents to buy them luxuries. And finally, answer C is not correct because he does not indicate that teenagers are not capable of hard work. He indicates that they simply do not want to do the hard work. And there's a difference between being incapable and being unwilling.